Hello, guys. It's the end of the national season in Europe and the beginning of the format for Duelist Advance. And we might be getting a ban list before the EUWCQ starts. So I would like to do a little bit of recap on this current format and discuss about what cards could be hit on the ban list and what cards could leave the ban list, etc., etc. And I would like to, yeah, give my own hot take about this because this format is with it is playable, but it's not great, and it's not really easy to address the format per se without addressing the crossover breakers decks specifically. Currently, the best two decks are Mitsurugi variants and Malice. Pure Riseal or Heraldic Riseal is also a very dominant deck, and also rogue decks such as Memento, Mermail, uh, Blue Eyes, those might be creeping up, and those also have to be kept in mind with the ban list, and with the release of new support and decks, such as the new Luna Light or the new Vanquish Soul support that is coming in the next main set. So I would like to address what could happen on the ban list. So before I talk about the very first card here, I would like to go over the actual cards. Malice. So Malice in itself, the biggest issue that Malice per se has is it creates these very divisive game states where if the Malice player goes first, you usually auto win game one. It's the best game one deck in the entire venue usually. But as soon as you go second, or as soon as you have to face side deck cards like Lancia or Chaos Hunter sometimes, um, you might find a little bit more issues in winning your games. And those cards that are sided against Malice are usually the type of cards that can be used both going first and going second, which makes it really rough for the Malice player. But if you're allowed to ignore those cards with Malice, it feels like the most unfair deck in the room. So how do we address Malice? Uh, so we have here the names for Malice, and I don't think that we have to change anything about Dormouse and White Rabbit because consistency hits usually are not the correct thing. But I would like, personally, if I could, I would ban Cat and unlimit these two. I think Malice is very capable with playing with these, but I don't think that will happen. I think that we might get something like this, or we also might get something like this, where we ban this card and we keep all the Malice cards alive. And that also applies to Backup Adignister. Backup Adignister is actually pretty healthy when it comes to Malice, mainly because it makes it not very divisive, not as divisive to side in the Lancios against Malice. Uh, like sometimes you will still be able to win the game, and that even though you were Lanciate. So that is why like backup cannot be really addressed without like making the format more toxic, at least from a Malice perspective. And also from a player perspective that has to face Malice because you'll be really mad if you don't see your Lancias. Because like Lancia is best card against Malice by far. And like if they only open Malice cards, usually are able to like turn stop them, and the Adignister cards kind of make Malice have some counterplay on this. So I think we can keep this as it is. and ban the Cyber's Wicked, because what is really unfair is if you're allowed to bridge those Malice cards into the backup. I'm fine with them having it hard draw because drawing a backup is not drawing extra hand traps behind the board. They can for sure extend more into their board, but I'm fine if they have a bigger board because bigger boards can be broken with board breakers a little better. So committing resources onto a board does not per se always make the board better. You always have to compare it with drawing hand traps. And also, as said, it keeps Malice in the state where Lancia just is not 100% guaranteed FTK. But yeah, banning Cyber's Wicked might actually keep the stack in line. So now let's talk about Riseal. Riseal in itself, the pure variant almost completely died out, and the pure variant was very known for being fairly fair to face. Like, Detonator is very strong, and it was very easily achievable even through multiple hand traps. But just facing a Detonator was very vulnerable to board breakers. And that is still the case, and actually even more the case now because engines have gotten stronger over the course of the last 6 months. And a detonator is much more beatable for most decks. As like crossover breakers started, Malice had a real issue beating detonator, but meanwhile now Malice has enough extenders to like just power through it with engine. I think detonator itself is fair per se, but what is not fair about Riseal is when it gets splashed with extra cards. And in that case, I would actually want to address a couple more things. So, how do we address Riseal? I think actually unlimiting both ice and sword is actually a good idea. And we can also do it to detonator, or we can keep it at one because detonator is a very strong boss monster. But what I would actually say is ban Ext. Ext is both the best going first and the best going second starter for Riseal. The main issue is that Ext is allowed to send random cards from their extra deck to the graveyard. This is all fine and dandy until the cards actually have trigger effects in the graveyard. So, for example, the Eclipse Twins is fairly strong as an option for keeping a detonator on board stuff, but also the Eclipse Twins enables more degenerate stuff, such as doing the Evil Swarm Ouroboros double hand loop that you can do. That is often done by decks such as Heraldic Riseal. And speaking of Heraldic Riseal, the actual dumbest thing that X can do is sending Heraldic Patriarch, and with that, X Riseal guarantees interaction as long as you don't get trolled. And like even if you get trolled, you still end on a detonator on that X Riseal, which is really dumb. And also, X Riseal makes it that the other Riseal cards are not as easily hand trappable. Therefore, I would say that it's fair to say if we unlimit all other Riseal cards but ban X, Riseal is a very fair mid-range control deck that you could play, and it would be disincentivized to be splashed in stuff like Mitsurugi or paired with stuff like heraldic cards. Um, Also, speaking of Riseal, something that Riseal variants love to do is setting up a Harpy's Featherstorm if you get Volt Charmy. And I think everybody can agree that this is unfair and should be addressed. What also should be addressed is this mistake that was left off the ban list for some reason, mainly because this produces uninteractive game states. And Why are we producing all these uninteractive game states? Mainly because of Charmies. Charmies in themselves are actually really good for the format, per se. Like, you have to imagine it like this. Because Charmies are the very best going second cards in the game, you're incentivized in game one to have them in your deck, which is good because not only does it make going second easier, it makes going first harder. Uh, this is this even it doesn't even matter if your opponent actually plays Charmies too. Your going first boards are going to be way more breakable if you're maining your 6 Charmies in the main deck because you will not have real interactive hand traps behind them. So if you actually want to address the Charmies, I mean, if you actually want to beat the board, it's going to be way easier because what you see is what you get. If there is a Caesar sitting there and your opponent is playing only Charmies as their hand traps, that Caesar is pretty much the entire end board rather than them having like an Ash Blossom, 2 Imperms, a Nibiru behind it, etc., etc. And through that, engines can power through because engines are fairly strong right now. But the main issue with this, what comes up with Charmies is if you draw multiples of those. Drawing multiple Charmies is fairly unfair because there is no real counterplay you can have against the second Charmy. Of course, it's a little bit risky and it cannot be done without good timing or without thought of the Charmy user. Because the first Charmy is fairly easy to throw, like Fuvalos on the first chance where he gets to summon from deck or extra deck, or Peruli in the standby phase. But if you have a second Charmy, if you're throwing 2 Charmies, it usually reveals that your hand is fairly weak. So what your opponent can do is, if they have already some interaction in their hand, such as an Ash Blossom or a Drone Lockbird or Nibiru, they might just say, okay, you know what? I pass turn, and then my non-engine is going to beat your engine because your engine amount is fairly weak. You're not going to have so many extenders if I don't give you any draws because you hand looped yourself for 2. But if those cards correctly resolve, like you throw 1 Charmy, and then you wait for the best opportunity to throw the second Charmy so that it becomes an upstart goblin, then it becomes really unfair. And for that case, I want Charmies to be semi-limited, at least Perulia and Fuvalos. I think this would be fairly okay for the format because they would still exist. They would still make you able to go second, but the double Charmy combo will come up late, a lot less. Speaking of Charmies, Ash Blossom, and furthermore, Called by the Grave and Crossout. Ash Blossom right now is just literally the the second, third, and fourth copy of Called by the Grave, and Crossout is the fifth. And this is specifically for Charmies. And usually, what you can experience when you play with Charmies is you open 1 Charmy and it's your only hand trap, and your opponent Ash Blossoms the Charmy. This is usually like a game loss scenario. Like you literally lose the game from there. If they droll themselves after you Charmy, that's not the case. But Ash Blossom specifically trades very favorably with Charmies because it's a 1-for-1 trade, but the 1-for-1 trade stops a lot of card advantage. Halt by the Grave is the same thing, but better because it can negate pretty much anything. It's not only a good hand trap negator, like you can negate their Ash Blossoms, but you can also like interact with their engine. And hand traps, as one of my friends said, should resolve. And Call by the Grave stops them from resolving. Currently, it is limited, but I don't want it there. I want it here. And same goes for Crossout Designate. Please ban both of these cards, Konami. Um, they are not very healthy for the game, and they make it very, very awkward. Speaking of making things awkward, this is the poster child of the format, and this card needs an errata. I don't think that people at Konami will think, oh yes, let's limit this card. This is not the way. Rule formats are usually notorious for being very disliked by the community. And the main issue with Droll is this card can be used as the best going first card in the game. Not only because it, in specific decks, can stop Charmies from drawing extra cards, such as Evil Twin or Malice, but if you have a Droll Lockbird behind your board, unless your opponent's deck does not care about it at all, like it doesn't search at all, this card usually ends the game right when it's getting thrown. It removes the illusion of being able to play, which makes it really unfun to try to play into a board. If I were in charge of Konami, I would personally semi or limit Droll, but in my opinion, this card needs either an errata or needs to be banned and retrained as a Mole Charmy. And I will list it here. But as of now, if you want the actual opinion, this card will be here for the EUWCQ. Nobody will touch it. And I would be very shocked if they touch it, because sadly, this card actually holds the format in check. This card is there to prevent very toxic formats. But yeah, this needs an errata so that this card does not apply going second to the going second player. Mitsurugi are TCG exclusive. So, what do we think about Mitsurugi? Mitsurugi is fairly strong on its own. The pure deck is really viable, but the main scary thing about Mitsurugi is it being splashed as a very efficient engine, such as like 3 Habakiri, 1 Murakumo, and one of each of the small names, as well as triple prayers and 1 ritual spell. So, what do we do to address this? I think limiting prayers will actually make Mitsurugi as a pure deck flourish more, while the overpowered, annoying Riseal variants will be taking the back line. Because this limits the grind game of Mitsurugi quite a bit if they decide to cut to the essentials for the deck. Also, I don't think that Habakiri should be hit on the ban list just yet. So we can leave it right here. King of the Feral Imps is fairly interesting. I don't know what to think about this. Uh, it could be here or it could be here, depending on what if Konami really, really, really wants Riseal to not play Mitsurugi. But I think Konami will allow it. John Engraver and Friends. The Fiendsmith engine has been a little bit weird lately because decks are very, very high power. And specifically with X Riseal, it's often an experience that I have firsthand while testing Fiendsmith that your Caesar is usually not enough to ensure that you live through a drone Lockbird, or that the Caesar just gets completely beat by the X Riseal. And also other non-engine can beat it fairly consistently. But still, it is fairly toxic that any 2 cards can end on 2 interruptions. So like normal summon a Charmy, a special summon whatever you want to special summon, link them into Moon and get your Caesar. I don't think that that is okay. So how do you address this? Number one option would be banning Caesar, but I don't think that that's best way to do it. But I think it's the Konami way to do it. Alternatively, you could talk about banning Necrocourt Princess. This would make Caesar and rank sixes still possible within the Fiendsmith deck, but it will make it less consistent and it will nerf the one copy of Engraver package that, for example, Memento likes to play. But still, I don't think that this will happen. Either they ban Caesar or they don't touch it at all. And the same goes with Engraver. I don't think that Engraver will be touched. It's like very discussed upon if you play like one Engraver, three Engraver plus Lacrima plus Paradise plus whatever, or how you want to do it. And I like this dynamic of deck building. There's no clear way how to build Fiendsmith in your other decks most efficiently. But I think we can all agree that Caesar is a little bit problematic. There are still other rank sixes that you can make. If you want to make an interruption out of your two random bodies, Evolzar Lars is a good option. Or you could do Ptolemy M7 and recycle some cards. But otherwise, it's fine. So, the next cards. I would like to talk a bit about Memento. Memento has been a fairly dominant tier 2 deck in the last couple months, and maybe it's time for it to be addressed. And there are like two options. The main strength of Memento is that it plays very well into all hand traps across the board, especially Imperm, because the deck loves to play a Bone Party, as well as playing cards like um, Grand Entrance, the Goblin card, the Goblin Quick Play. And both of these cards allow your on-field effects of your Mementos to dodge Imperm fairly well. Well, both of them also are consistency cards because the Goblin Biker card searches you the Memento Goblin, and Bone Party searches you anything. So, do we address this? I could see that they could address the consistency of this happening a little bit because I noticed that Konami likes to use the semi-limited list a little bit more. I don't think that the horse has to be hit. It's fairly important for the deck so that it functions, so let's keep it there. The next rogue deck I would like to discuss is Mermail. I do not have Moulin Glacier in here. I forgot to put it in, but I think it is more important to talk about these cards. I think Minstrel should be banned because this card gives hand knowledge, and it's a searchable card that gives hand knowledge and controls the rips off of Moulin Glacier and forces hand traps to be thrown very awkwardly. I don't think that this is healthy for the game. What I think is acceptable, it's it's unfair to play against, but it's acceptable as long as your opponent cannot interact with your hand. Is the barrier statue of the torrents. We can leave it as it is. Also, to talk about Malice a little bit more, I think Gold Sark has to stay where it is. And Lancia also should stay where it is. And now for the final deck is White Forest as a Mina deck that should be hit. It is a fairly unfair deck, but it's not performing. I would say keep it where it is. The only card that I would imagine that should be hit in White Forest is Wanted, because Wanted is one of the best extenders in the deck, and it allows you to do so many shenanigans. Okay, now unhits. Since Summon Sorceress got her errata, I can see them limiting it from banned, and we can see what happens with it. Naturia Sacred Tree. This card is a relic of the past, and I think it should be unlimited. Let the Runic Naturia players do what they want. Zodiac Trident. I think this card could be limited. It's overdue again. We have a detonator in our format, for God's sake. Um, if detonator is allowed to live, so is Zodiac Trident. Tearlament's Kitkalos. This is a card that a lot of people would say uh, should still stay here. I think you could make an argument for limiting this card, but I think that is not a Konami thing to do because mainly Elements, even though it is one of the most hit decks in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh, it's still scary to face. And having this card in the deck instantly makes it uh, alters the deck building drastically and will give the deck a lot of consistency, which is the main issue, but also power. So I think this card will stay banned. Spiral Master Plan can be limited. I don't think that Spiral is good enough, especially with the hits to all of the generic extra deck spice that you can play. And the final card, because the OCG is actually playing it, Red Reboot. This is fairly interesting. This has the same problematic as Droll. Red Reboot shuts down an entire card archetype, per se, and can be used both going first and going second. But the thing is, what Reboot wants to shut down right now is usually an unfair interaction. Like, the most fair thing I can think of that a Reboot will shut down consistently is Dominus Impulse. But people that are playing trap cards usually don't just side. There are either archetype traps, in which case it's usually only one part of the entire interaction of the board, or it is post-side floodgates, and I think Red Reboot kind of addresses those. So the question is, how do we handle this? I think the TCG will not think about Red Reboot, but I could see that this card goes here. I'll put it here because the errata. It could need an errata where you cannot deal damage to your opponent during the turn you activate this, so that going second, there's more a back and forth for back row decks. But in general, this is how I think that the format could shape up. And personally, I think the most important hits are X Riseal, Featherstorm, and Called by the Grave. Uh, Leave in the comments what you think about my personal ban list take here. Maybe I am yapping some complete baloney, but maybe you guys agree. I hope you guys enjoyed and see ya.